She didn't yell. She didn't insult him. She didn't even say his name wrong. All she did was refuse to shake his hand. 12 hours later, $2.4 billion vanished. Her empire collapsed, and the man she'd dismissed walked away untouched. Because sometimes racism doesn't need words. It just needs one mistake in front of the wrong person. Margaret Whitmore had built her entire life on one unshakable principle. Appearances matter. At 53, she stood in the marble lobby of Whitmore Capital Management like a queen surveying her kingdom. 27 floors of glass and steel, 400 employees, $2.4 billion in assets under management. All of it, hers. Well, technically, the firm belonged to the investors, the pension funds, the family trusts, the endowments that had placed their faith and their fortunes in the Whitmore name. But Margaret didn't think of it that way. She thought of it as hers. She'd earned it, hadn't she? 30 years of 16-hour days, 3 failed marriages, a daughter who barely spoke to her. Every sacrifice had been worth it to build something that would outlast her, something that bore her name. Mrs. Whitmore? Her assistant Julie appeared at her elbow, tablet in hand. The 9 o'clock is here. Margaret's fingers froze mid-scroll. Apex Ventures. The name had been haunting her for 6 months, a relatively new private equity firm that had somehow amassed an impressive portfolio in less than 3 years. Tech startups, real estate, green energy, everything they touched seemed to turn to gold, and they wanted to meet with her. The letter had arrived in January. Professional, courteous, vague. We're exploring strategic partnerships with established wealth management firms. Would Mrs. Whitmore be available for an exploratory conversation? Margaret almost ignored it. She didn't need partners. Whitmore Capital had been doing just fine without anyone's help. But then her CFO, David, had pulled her aside. Margaret, you need to take this meeting. Why? We're not looking for investors. David had given her that look, the one that meant he knew something she didn't. They're not offering to invest. They're offering to refer clients, very wealthy clients, the kind who write 8-figure checks. That had changed everything. Now, standing in her lobby, Margaret felt a flutter of something she rarely experienced, anticipation. Where are they? She asked Julie. Conference room B. There's just one representative. He arrived 15 minutes early. Margaret's nodded approvingly. Punctuality. Professionalism. Maybe this wouldn't be a waste of time after all. She straightened her Chanel jacket, checked her reflection in the marble lobby doors, and walked toward the conference room with the measured pace of someone who'd spent decades projecting authority. Julie opened the door for her, and Margaret stopped breathing. Standing by the window, silhouetted against the New York skyline, was a black man in a perfectly tailored navy suit. He turned when she entered, extending his hand with a warm smile. Mrs. Whitmore, thank you for making time to meet with me. I'm Marcus. Margaret's face did something she would later spend sleepless nights regretting. It closed. Every feature hardened. Her eyes went cold, her mouth pressed into a thin line. The hand she'd been about to extend dropped to her side. I'm sorry, she said in a tone that communicated she was anything but. There's been some kind of mistake. Marcus's smile faltered slightly, but didn't disappear. Mistake? I was expecting someone from Apex Ventures, senior leadership. A pause. The air in the room changed temperature. Marcus lowered his hand slowly. I am from Apex Ventures. I'm Marcus Thornton, the founder and CEO. Margaret's eyes narrowed. The CEO. Yes, ma'am. She looked him up and down with an expression that would have frozen nitrogen. Young, black, confident. Everything she'd spent 30 years proving didn't belong in rooms like this. How old are you? She asked. 34. 34. She repeated it like it was a particularly offensive curse word. And you're telling me you've built a multi-billion-dollar private equity firm in less than 5 years? 3 years, actually. Margaret's laugh had no warmth in it. Well, that's quite a story. She didn't sit down, didn't gesture for him to sit, just stood there between Marcus and the door like a bouncer deciding whether to let someone into an exclusive club. Mrs. Whitmore, Marcus said carefully, I know this might seem unusual. I'm happy to provide references, track records, our portfolio performance. That will be unnecessary. I understand you might have questions about, I don't have questions. I have a very busy schedule, and I don't appreciate having my time wasted. Marcus's expression finally shifted. The warmth drained away, replaced with something harder to read. Understanding, maybe. Disappointment. I see, he said quietly. I'm sure you're very accomplished, Margaret continued, her tone making it clear she believed none of the sort. But Whitmore Capital has very specific standards for the partnerships we pursue. We work with established firms, reputable firms, firms with proven track records. Apex Ventures has a proven track record. In 3 years, Margaret's eyebrow arched. Anyone can get lucky for 3 years. Call me when you've survived a real market downturn, when you've weathered a recession, when you've built something that lasts. She walked to the door and opened it. Julie will validate your parking. Marcus stood there for a long moment. He didn't look angry. He didn't look hurt. He looked sad, like he'd seen this before and had hoped just this once to be wrong. He picked up his briefcase, a beautiful leather piece that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and walked toward the door. When he reached Margaret, he paused, extended his hand one more time. Thank you for your time, Mrs. Whitmore. Margaret looked at his hand like it was something dirty, and left it, hanging in the air between them. Marcus dropped it, nodded once, and walked out. Margaret watched him disappear into the elevator. Felt a surge of satisfaction. She'd protected her firm, her reputation, her standards. That's what leaders did. They made hard choices. She turned to find Julie staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Cancel my 10 o'clock, Margaret said. I need to call David. Mrs. Whitmore. Now, Julie. She walked back to her office, her heels clicking against the marble with the sharp rhythm of certainty. She didn't notice Julie's hands shaking as she typed. Didn't see her assistant pull out her phone with trembling fingers. Didn't hear the frantic text message. She did it. She actually did it. He just left. Margaret closed her office door, sat behind her mahogany desk, and smiled. Another crisis averted. Another day of maintaining the standards that made Whitmore Capital great. She had no idea that her entire world had just started crumbling, and by morning, there would be nothing left. Margaret was reviewing the quarterly reports when her phone lit up. David, her CFO. Please tell me you didn't do what Julie just told me you did. Margaret leaned back in her chair. Hello to you too, David. Margaret, tell me you didn't refuse to shake Marcus Thornton's hand. I did what was necessary to. Do you have any idea who Marcus Thornton is? Some kid who got lucky with a few tech investments. The silence on the other end of the line was so complete that Margaret actually checked to see if the call had dropped. David? I'm trying to decide if you're joking or if you genuinely just tanked this entire firm. Margaret sat up straighter. Excuse me? Marcus Thornton isn't some kid who got lucky. David's voice was tight, controlled, the way he sounded right before he quit one of her previous jobs. He's the Marcus Thornton, the youngest person to ever make partner at Goldman Sachs, the guy who predicted the crypto crash, the same Marcus Thornton who has personal relationships with half the billionaires in Silicon Valley. David, I think you're being dramatic. The Henderson Pension Fund, the one we're meeting with tomorrow, that $890 million account that would make us the third largest wealth management firm in the state? What about it? Marcus Thornton is on the investment committee. The room tilted slightly. The Carmichael Family Trust, $1.2 billion. They've been with us for 8 years. David, the Morrison Endowment, the Tanaka Group, Blackstone Emerging Markets. Do you want me to keep going? Because I can keep going. I can list every major account we have, and I can tell you exactly how Marcus Thornton is connected to every single one of them. That's impossible. Is it? Or did you just refuse to shake hands with the most well-connected person in private equity because you made an assumption based on what exactly, Margaret? What assumption did you make? Margaret felt something cold spreading through her chest. I made a business decision. You made a racist decision. How dare you? I've worked for you for 7 years, Margaret. 7 years of overlooking comments, of ignoring the pattern of who you hire, who you promote, who you trust in rooms that matter. I told myself it was generational. I told myself it wasn't my business. But this? His voice cracked. This is going to destroy us. Margaret stayed late at the office. She wasn't worried, not really. David was overreacting. Yes, she'd been rude. Yes, she might need to send an apology email, but business was business. Money was money. People didn't throw away millions of dollars over a handshake. Her email pinged. From Henderson Pension Fund. Subject, tomorrow's meeting. Dear Mrs. Whitmore, we regret to inform you that we will need to postpone tomorrow's meeting indefinitely. After careful consideration, we have decided to pursue other wealth management partnerships at this time. We wish you the best in your future endeavors. Margaret read it twice. 3 times. Picked up her phone. Called Thomas Henderson directly. It went to voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. Again. This time it didn't even ring, just went straight to voicemail. She'd been blocked. Her hands started shaking. Margaret was still at her desk when the second email came. Then the third. Then the fourth. By midnight, her inbox looked like a massacre. The Carmichael Family Trust, withdrawing all assets effective immediately. Morrison Endowment, terminating our partnership after careful review. Tanaka Group, we no longer feel our values align with Whitmore Capital. Blackstone Emerging Markets, effective immediately, we are reallocating our portfolio. Each email was professional, courteous, final, and each one felt like a knife between her ribs. Margaret called David. I know, he said before she could speak. I've been getting calls for the past 3 hours, Margaret. They're all leaving. Everyone connected to Thornton. Everyone who heard what happened. This is insane. This is coordinated. This is illegal. It's not illegal for clients to move their money. Based on lies. Based on some story that makes me look like... Like what, Margaret? What does it make you look like? She couldn't say it. Wouldn't say it. I didn't do anything wrong. You refused to shake a black man's hand in front of witnesses because you assumed he wasn't qualified to be in the room. That's not... I didn't... Julie was there. She saw everything. And apparently she has a cousin who works at Goldman Sachs, who texted a friend at Blackstone who happened to be in a group chat with someone at Carmichael Trust. Margaret felt the walls closing in. This is the world we live in now, Margaret. Everything spreads. Everything gets out. And when you disrespect someone like Marcus Thornton, someone who has spent 10 years building relationships based on respect and trust, those people remember. So what do I do? The question came out smaller than she'd intended. Desperate. I don't know if there's anything you can do. Margaret sat in her office, surrounded by decades of awards and achievements. Top 50 Women in Finance, Excellence in Wealth Management, Trailblazer Award. Every plaque felt like a lie now. Her phone buzzed. A news alert. Whitmore Capital faces mass exodus as clients pull $2.2 billion. The article was brief, factual, devastating, and buried in the third paragraph, sources suggest the withdrawals may be connected to an incident involving Apex Ventures CEO Marcus Thornton, though neither Whitmore Capital nor Thornton's representatives have commented. Margaret's hands trembled as she opened her laptop, searched for Marcus Thornton, and felt her stomach drop. His biography read like a masterclass in excellence. Harvard Business School, top of his class, Goldman Sachs, youngest partner in history, built Apex Ventures from nothing into a $3 billion powerhouse, board member of 4 Fortune 500 companies, major donor to educational initiatives for underprivileged youth. There were photos of him with presidents, with tech CEOs, with cultural icons. And there was one video that made Margaret's blood turn to ice. A TED Talk from 2 years ago. She clicked play. Marcus stood on stage, calm and confident. I've had doors slammed in my face. I've been mistaken for the help. I've had people refuse to shake my hand because they assumed I didn't belong. And I learned something from those experiences. He paused. The audience was silent. I learned that respect isn't something you demand. It's something you build through consistency, through excellence, through showing up every single day and proving your worth, not to the people who doubt you, but to the people who believe in you. And I learned that when someone shows you who they are, you should believe them, because character isn't what you do when people are watching. It's what you do when you think no one important is. The audience erupted in applause. Margaret closed the laptop, put her head in her hands, and for the first time in 30 years, she cried. Margaret walked into the office to find it almost empty. Half her staff had called in sick. The other half couldn't meet her eyes. Julie's desk was cleaned out. A resignation letter sat in the center, typed and formal. Dear Mrs. Whitmore, effective immediately, I am resigning from my position. I can no longer in good conscience work for an organization that... Margaret didn't finish reading it. She walked to David's office. Found it empty too. His letter was even shorter. Margaret, I tried to warn you. I hope whatever you were protecting was worth it. David. She stood in the empty hallway of her empty firm. 27 floors of glass and steel, 400 employees, $2.4 billion in assets under management. Gone. All of it. In less than 12 hours. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered anyway. Mrs. Whitmore, a woman's voice, professional. This is Rebecca Chen from the Wall Street Journal. I'm running a story about the Whitmore capital situation and wanted to give you an opportunity to comment. I have no comment. Is it true that you refused to meet with Marcus Thornton because of his race? That is absolutely not. I didn't. It had nothing to do with... So you did refuse to shake his hand? Margaret hung up, but she knew the story would run anyway. And it did. By noon, her name was trending. By evening, she was a case study. By the next day, she was a cautionary tale. Margaret sat in her apartment, the penthouse she could no longer afford, staring at an envelope that had arrived that morning. The return address said simply, Apex Ventures. She opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a handwritten letter. Dear Mrs. Whitmore, I want you to know that I didn't make any calls. I didn't tell anyone not to work with you. I didn't orchestrate a boycott or organize a response. I didn't have to. The people who chose to withdraw their investments did so on their own, because over the past 10 years, I've built relationships based on mutual respect. I've shown up for them. I've protected their interests. I've treated them with dignity. And when they heard what happened in your conference room, not from me, but from your own staff, they made their own decisions about what kind of values they want their money to support. You asked me during our meeting how old I was. You implied that 3 years wasn't enough time to build something real, something that lasts. But here's what I've learned. Legacy isn't about time. It's about trust. And trust isn't something you can build in 30 years if you spend those years looking down on people. I truly hope you find what you're looking for, Mrs. Whitmore, whatever that is. Respectfully, Marcus Thornton. P.S. I noticed your firm manages several educational endowments. If you're looking for new clients, I'd be happy to introduce you to some organizations that do incredible work in underserved communities. They're always looking for wealth managers who share their values. Margaret read the letter 3 times. The P.S. broke something inside her. He was still offering help. After everything. After she'd humiliated him. After she'd judged him. After she'd refused to see him as human. He was still offering a hand. Margaret sat across from Marcus Thornton in a small coffee shop in Brooklyn. Not a conference room, not her territory. His choice. Thank you for meeting with me, she said quietly. Marcus nodded. Of course. I don't know how to... I've been trying to figure out what to say, how to apologize for something so... hurtful? She flinched. Yes. Mrs. Whitmore, I've thought a lot about our meeting, about what happened, and I think I understand. You do? You spent 30 years fighting to be taken seriously in a world that didn't want to make room for you. You sacrificed everything to build something that would prove you belonged. And then I walked in, young, confident, taking up space you'd spent decades earning. And you saw me as a threat. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. But here's what you didn't see, Marcus continued gently. You didn't see an ally, someone who understood what it felt like to have doors slammed in their face, someone who could have helped you build something even bigger than what you created alone. I know, Margaret whispered. Do you? Because I don't think this is really about me. I think this is about you looking in a mirror and not liking what you saw. He wasn't wrong. The firm is gone. My reputation is destroyed. My staff resigned. My clients left. Everything I built. Gone. Is it? She looked up. Marcus slid a folder across the table. What is this? A proposal. I've been talking to some of your former clients, the ones who left not because they wanted to, but because they felt they had to make a statement. They're willing to come back. Margaret's breath caught. But not to Whitmore Capital. What? They're willing to invest in a new firm, one that operates on different principles. Diversity, inclusion, respect. One that actively seeks out managers and opportunities that have been overlooked by traditional finance. He paused. I'd like you to run it. Margaret stared at him. Why? Because I believe people can change. I believe in second chances. And because the world doesn't need another person cast out and bitter, it needs people who've learned from their mistakes and committed to doing better. I don't deserve this. Maybe not, but the communities this firm could serve, they deserve someone with your experience, your skills, your connections, used the right way. Margaret opened the folder. Inside was a complete business plan. Venture capital fund focusing on minority-owned businesses, wealth management for nonprofits and community organizations, educational initiatives for the next generation of diverse financial leaders. And at the top of the advisory board, Marcus Thornton. Why would you do this? She asked, her voice breaking. Because 12 years ago, someone refused to shake my hand after my first big presentation at Goldman, called security because they didn't believe I worked there, and I went home and cried, and I almost quit. He leaned forward. But someone gave me another chance, saw past that one moment to who I could become, and I promised myself that if I ever had the power to do the same for someone else, I would. Even after what I did? Especially after what you did. Because this isn't about you earning forgiveness, Mrs. Whitmore. It's about you earning change.